Well, hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Well, I'm really excited for the stream we are about to have today, mostly because this is an issue that I feel like I have been beating my head against the wall on for a year and a half, possibly longer. I don't know. Can't do math that easily off the top of my head, but definitely about a year and a half. I have been extraordinarily frustrated over the fact that the New Hampshire GOP, led by Chris Sununu, completely watered down and sabotaged the so-called divisive concept bill, the anti-CRT bill, that the state passed and signed into law in June of 2021. And the reason that I have been incredibly frustrated about this is that it turns out, and I told them this at the time, that the version of the bill that they passed does absolutely nothing to ban the teaching of critical race theory from the classroom. It is but a showpiece. It is only about trying to have something that they can say, look, we're doing something about the problem. But the problem is, it doesn't actually stop the teaching of critical race theory in any way. And I'm going to prove that to you over the course of this stream. Now, I was one of the people that was lobbying very heavily for the original divisive concept bill as it was introduced back in February or March of 2021. And we're going to talk about that bill. We're going to talk about how that bill morphed from the awesome version of the bill that would have actually done a lot of good in the state of New Hampshire to the watered down, horrible, useless, feckless, toothless bill that is on the books today. I'm going to take you through the whole chain of events about how that happened. And I'm going to tell you exactly what needs to be done to fix it. And I am very honored to be joined here today, well, sort of, by the assistant majority leader in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, Melissa Blasek. Now, Melissa got herself roped into this. Melissa, by the way, also happens to be the state representative for the town that I live in. She's literally my state rep. And that becomes important because a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, Melissa, who has a locked Twitter account because she's not brave enough for the public, let alone her own constituents, but even the general public, she's not brave enough to have the public actually see the things that she's saying. A couple weeks ago, Melissa Blasek said to me on Twitter, Carlin, I just don't think that you are serious about getting critical race theory out of schools. And I said, Melissa, I have been telling you guys for the last year and a half how you screwed up the original anti-CRT bill and precisely and exactly what you need to do to fix the anti-CRT bill so that it actually prevents critical race theory from being taught in schools. And Melissa said, well, I tried to get in touch. No one could get in touch with you, Carlin. And I said, I had regular conversations with Keith Ammon about this, Keith Ammon being the sponsor of the original bill. I had conversations with many state reps about this. Melissa Blasek never tried to get in touch with me, but I had many conversations with many other state reps laying this out. And if that weren't enough, I published publicly about what was going on. I wrote this article in April of 2021, a month and a half before the divisive concept bill was signed into law in New Hampshire. Now, at that point, we thought Chris Sununu was going to run for Senate. But in this article that was published publicly on my Substack, I laid out exactly and precisely what was wrong with what Chris Sununu was trying to do to the anti-CRT bill in New Hampshire. This is currently on my Substack, carlin.substack.com, if you want to go take a look at it. And if that wasn't enough, I also followed up with, not that screen. Hang on, different screen, that one. I also followed up with this article in January of this year, talking about how Virginia made exactly and precisely the same mistake that New Hampshire made, which is why the executive order that Glenn Youngkin signed on day one did not ban critical race theory from being taught in the classroom because they based it off of, at least partially, what New Hampshire did. And what New Hampshire doesn't ban critical race theory from being taught in the classroom. So I have written about this extensively. I have spoken to multiple state legislators about this extensively. I have offered at any time to walk people through exactly and precisely what happened. But Melissa, again, my state rep, one of my state reps, Melissa decided to declare publicly on Twitter that I just wasn't serious about this issue. That the thing that I have uprooted my life for the last 3 years was just not something that I took very seriously. The thing that I have been attacked over ad nauseum by members of both the Democrat and Republican Party. These are things I just don't take seriously. She decided to declare that publicly on Twitter. And so what I said to Melissa was, Melissa, you name a time. You name any time you like, I will clear my schedule. And you and I can have a public conversation about what the New Hampshire GOP did to ruin the bill in the first place and what you idiots need to do in order to fix the bill. And I will lay out everything for you. I will walk you through it. I will give you great advice about what you need to do to fix this problem. And we can do it anytime you want to do it. And I put that offer out there to Melissa. And then I waited. Several days went by and Melissa didn't do anything. And then I had multiple people calling me going, Carlin, like, we just don't understand. Like, why are you going after Melissa? She's on our side. And I said, well, Melissa's welcome to have a conversation with me anytime she wants to about what the New Hampshire GOP did to ruin this bill, what they need to do to fix it, to show me that she's actually taking this issue seriously. Multiple people reached out to Melissa. Melissa still declined. I reached out personally to Melissa on several occasions to, again, reinforce this offer. And so today, I'm happy to welcome Melissa to the channel for a serious conversation about how to fix the anti-CRT bill in New Hampshire. Melissa, welcome. Thank you for joining me. It's really great to know that you and the New Hampshire GOP take this issue so seriously that you are willing to take some time out of your busy schedule to discuss what I have been telling you guys for the last year and a half, which is you broke the anti-CRT bill. Critical race theory is still being taught in schools in New Hampshire, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do to fix it. I just really appreciate you taking the time out for a serious conversation. Well, thankfully, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I put together for us because I really, Melissa, I just really want to make this really clear. What happened in the course of this, and just so there's no mistake. And Melissa, I'm really happy to provide you with the slides after this presentation so that you can walk your compatriots in the New Hampshire GOP through exactly what you guys need to do. So let's start with how we got here. Let's start with that. In early 2021, State Representative Keith Ammon introduced a divisive concept bill in the State House. It was the first state-level anti-CRT legislation in the country. I'm very proud that New Hampshire was the first state to introduce this at the state level in the country. And it was a great bill. It was based off of Donald Trump's executive order, which banned critical race theory in the federal government and for all federal government contractors. And I thought that was pretty great. And so this got introduced in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. And then it all went awry. Now, the original bill was dubbed HB 544. You can see a partial version of the original text here. If you would like to read the original text, of course, Melissa, you have access to that, being that you're a state legislator. So you know exactly where to find it. But just in case anyone watching would like to read the original text of the bill, because there are about 803 videos on my channel where I'm reading the original text of the bill, and I just don't want to do it again. We're going to focus in on the stuff that's important. Don't get it twisted. But if you want to read the original text of the bill, just look up HB 544 New Hampshire. It's the one from 2021, and it was titled The Propagation of Divisive Concepts Prohibited. Now, the original bill that was introduced in the House of Representatives laid out a whole list of definitions for what does it mean to be a divisive concept. So we can see here the very first definition on the list of what it means to be a divisive concept is that you would not be able to teach that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex, and has a whole bunch of other definitions. But there's one in particular that I want to draw your attention to, and that is this. It was the second definition on the list laid out in the original bill. The state of New Hampshire, that you cannot teach that the state of New Hampshire or that the United States is fundamentally racist or sexist. That was part of the original bill. In fact, it was so important to the original bill that it was placed in the second definition when we go to that list of definitions in the bill. All right. Now, once this was introduced, then our illustrious governor, New Hampshire GOP representative for governor, came out and said he was going to veto this bill. And this was covered all over the place. I take particular credit for it being covered in the Blaze because I was the person that alerted the Blaze to this bullshit. And basically, we were trying to use the media to pressure Chris Sununu into, not pandering to the teachers union and actually doing his job as a Republican. Because when this bill was introduced, Chris Sununu almost immediately came out and said, if this bill passes, I'm going to veto it. So it was not the Democratic Party that watered down the bill. The Democratic Party had absolutely no power in this situation at all. When this happened, and this is still actually true today, nothing has changed. Chris Sununu, Republican governor of the state of New Hampshire. The Republican Party controlled the New Hampshire State Senate, and the Republican Party controlled the New Hampshire House of Representatives. The Republicans controlled every branch of government in the state of New Hampshire. So there was no reason for Chris Sununu to come out and say, I'm going to veto the anti-critical race theory bill, and yet he did it anyway. And when he did it, he created an uproar of epic proportion and a massive shit show in which he was not only being pressured by people in the Republican Party at the state level to take it back, he was also being pressured by national media to take it back. This was a blatant attempt to pander to the Democrats, to pander to the teachers' unions in the state of New Hampshire so that he could set up his run for Senate later, because at that time, he was planning on running for Senate. Not true anymore. He's now decided to run for governor again, probably going to run for president at some point, but at that time he was going to run for Senate. And at least we think that this was just a one-off and that Chris Sununu was great generally. He followed that up this year. This is just an aside. He followed that up this year with saying that he would also veto the Parental Bill of Rights in education. Again, the Democrats aren't the ones sabotaging these things, Melissa. The Republicans are the ones sabotaging these things. Now, Melissa, on Twitter, you assured me that really, Carlin, you just need to be patient and let us have backroom conversations in order to fix this. And yet that's the way we do things in New Hampshire, Carlin. We don't have public conversations about these things. We instead have backroom conversations where we negotiate things out and we fix them. Well, Melissa, the problem is that I've been waiting a year and a half for you guys to do what is required to fix the anti-CRT bill that you broke in 2021. And you still haven't done anything about the fact that the Parental Bill of Rights died as soon as Chris Sununu said he was going to veto it. So obviously, those backroom conversations are not working. And I don't think that children in New Hampshire schools should be forced to be indoctrinated just because you want to take your time and have conversations over whiskey and cigars where no one else can hear you. I think parents in New Hampshire have a right to know what's going on. And I think that you have a right, or a responsibility rather, to have those conversations in public, particularly when it pertains to your constituents who have given up their lives to fight for this type of legislation and these types of fixes. Maybe that's just me. So when Chris Sununu came out and said that he was going to veto the divisive concept bill in 2021, what happened was actually kind of brilliant. And what happened is all these Republicans started getting together, and I was in on some of these meetings where they were talking about basically how do we get around this somehow, some way. And what ended up happening, and I have to just give massive shout outs to the Republicans who cared enough about the students in New Hampshire, cared way more than Melissa apparently cares, to come up with this strategy. What they did is they decided to table the bill itself and take the text from the bill and add the text from the bill to the state budget. Okay, so if you look up HB 544 and actually look at the text of the bill on the internet, it's going to say that the bill was tabled. But what really happened is they took the exact text that existed in that bill and they added it to the budget. And the reason that they did that was because Chris Sununu was not going to veto the state budget. So they were trying to get around Chris Sununu's threat of a veto to say, okay, asshole, we're going to take this thing that you don't like and we're going to put it in the bill that you have to sign. Otherwise, your entire state government is going to be defunded. So it's basically a backdoor. And it was awesome. Okay, because at that point, Chris Sununu's kind of backed into a corner. Does he want to bend the knee and sign the bill, or does he want to actually veto his own state budget? Well, enter Chris Sununu's prime cronies. We have the Attorney General, John Formella, and we have State Senator Jeb Bradley. Now, these are the two people. When Chris Sununu doesn't want to get his hands dirty with something, what he does is he goes to the state senators that he likes and he tells them what to do in order to fix the problem that he has so that they get the blame so that it's not put on Chris Sununu. And so what he did was he had John Formello and Jeb Bradley, and John Formello is the attorney general, so he's not in the Senate, but he was like orchestrating and being the puppet master of this whole thing. And basically he said, I don't want to sign this bill as is, go fix it. And so what John Formello, and by the way, John Formello is currently the guy who runs the Human Rights Commission in New Hampshire, which is the agency that's responsible for actually enforcing the bill. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, okay? That's important. Because if you have Chris Sununu's crony that didn't like the bill in the first place, being in charge of the agency that's actually in charge of enforcing the bill, you might imagine that the bill might not actually get enforced even after it gets signed into law, which is exactly what's happening now. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. So Chris Sununu went to John and Jeb and said, gentlemen, you need to go and pull some shenanigans so that I don't have to sign this bill that I don't want to sign so that I can still pander to the teachers union. And when that happened, John and Jeb went and changed the language of the bill, which destroyed its effectiveness. And they basically changed it into an anti-discrimination bill. Now, this is entirely predictable because, Melissa, Republicans don't tend to know how critical race theory is taught in the classroom. What they do is they look at headlines of things that talk about how critical race theory discriminates against white people, and they say, I know how we fix the problem. We write an anti-discrimination bill so that this can't be taught. But the problem, Melissa, is this. That's not how critical race theory is being taught in the classroom. And I'm going to prove that to you because in a minute, we're going to watch a video of how critical race theory is actually taught in the classroom as experienced by an 8th grader who took the video for me of a real life social studies class. So what was written into this bill, and we can see here, and guys, I'm sorry if you can hear some banging because they're redoing my roof today, and I thought they were gonna be done by now, but they're not done. They're still banging on the roof. So that's what it is. They're redoing my roof. That's important. Sorry. But what you can see here is this is a snippet from the article that I just showed you. But the version that passed on Thursday morning that was in the state Senate, proposed by Senator Jeb Bradley, makes a Wolfboro Republican makes last minute changes to the House language, which Bradley argues addresses the concerns about the suppression of speech. Bradley's amendment would, and by the way, so the excuse that Chris Sununu gave, Melissa, for not wanting to sign the anti-CRT bill in the first place is that it suppressed free speech of teachers, which is ironic considering Chris Sununu received a very clear memo from the former head of the New Hampshire Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court, which explained to him exactly and specifically that this bill did not violate free speech of teachers because teachers, when they are acting as educators in the classroom, do not have free speech protections. This has already been decided by the Supreme Court of the United States. A memo was provided to Chris Sununu saying, Chris, you're not right about the suppression of free speech stuff. You're not right at all. And it was very, very clear to him. It was explained in multiple meetings. Chris Sununu decided to ignore all that. So the excuse that they gave for needing to change the language of the bill was that the bill suppresses free speech when it actually doesn't, because educators, as you know, Melissa, do not have free speech protections in the classroom. And so what happened is Bradley's amendment would expand the bill's scope to include identities of people beyond race and sex, broadening the bill to also include age, gender, blah, 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 all other immutable characteristics. Basically, they turned it from something about suppressing speech in schools to an anti-discrimination bill. Now, when that happened, they removed important wording from the bill. So they turned it into, if you look in HB2 that was passed in 2021 in New Hampshire, they turned it into this section, right to freedom from discrimination in public workplaces and education. There's some important language that they removed. And the most important thing is this. They removed the provision that says that teachers in New Hampshire cannot teach that the state of New Hampshire or that the United States is fundamentally racist and sexist. You following so far, Melissa? Is this making sense? The bill was great. The bill actually would have protected against critical race theory being taught in classes. And then Chris Sununu interfered. He had his cronies rewrite the bill in the state Senate, and they removed this key provision. Are we following along so far in this very serious discussion about how you guys destroyed the anti-critical race theory bill and exactly what you need to do to fix it? Because this is important, Melissa. See, the thing is, I have been beating my head against the wall trying to explain this to the New Hampshire GOP for a year and a half. I have been perfectly willing to take any phone call, take any meeting, have any conversation in which a member of the New Hampshire GOP was willing to discuss why taking this provision out of the bill was problematic. And you know who took me up on that at the time that it happened? Keith Ammon. Keith Ammon and I had several phone calls about this because what happened, it's also important in terms of timing. So the state Senate waited until the very last minute to release the new language of the bill. And so then there was like a 24-hour mad dash to try to figure out how they changed the language and what the implications were. And I told Keith Ammon and several other state reps at the time that taking out this line was going to be a problem. And Keith Ammon listened to me. He did. And Keith Ammon, after the bill was passed in the state Senate, tried to reintroduce this portion of the bill during the reconciliation process. And do you know what happened, Melissa, when Keith Ammon listened to what I told him and tried to reintroduce this portion of the bill? The Republicans wouldn't even vote on it because they were pissed at Keith Ammon for making statements about Chris Sununu's emergency powers and how he didn't want Chris Sununu to have those emergency powers anymore. It seems to me, Melissa, the person who's serious about stopping critical race theory in schools, it seems to me a little bit ridiculous that the New Hampshire GOP was so bent out of shape about Keith Ammon making statements against King Sununu and his executive powers that he had been clinging to through the entire pandemic, it's a little bit ridiculous to me that you guys were so bitter about Keith Ammon making a public statement that you wouldn't introduce for a vote the one line that needed to be in this bill to actually prevent critical race theory from being taught in the classroom. Seems to me to be a little bit petty. I don't know why the New Hampshire GOP wants to punish New Hampshire school children and force them to learn critical race theory just because you're upset that Keith Ammon made a statement against Chris Sununu. I don't know. Do you want to provide us some insight into why that might have happened? Ah, well, maybe we'll get that insight another day. Maybe we'll get that insight another time. So, why is this statement so important? Well, removing this wording from the bill is what allows critical race theory to be taught in New Hampshire schools today. Because if you can teach that America is a fundamentally racist country, then you can teach systemic racism, you can teach equity, and you can teach the 1619 Project. And all of those things are currently being taught in New Hampshire schools. The underlying premise of systemic racism is the idea that racism is embedded into every part of our society. This is what they are teaching when they are teaching that America is a fundamentally racist country. That is why it was so important to the teachers' unions to get that provision out of the bill, which is what I tried to explain to you guys in 2021, but you didn't listen. This is why they wanted that in there. Because with that provision removed, that the New Hampshire GOP refused to put back in, even though they were told on multiple occasions what would happen, they are now teaching systemic racism in New Hampshire schools because of that. They are also teaching the 1619 Project in New Hampshire schools because that provision was removed. Now, the 1619 Project, as you can see here in Politico, has been discredited on multiple occasions. Multiple occasions. But in New Hampshire schools, they can teach the 1619 Project because the basis of this is that racism was created at America's foundings, which they believed happened in 1619. It gets a little bit more complicated than that. We're not going to go into all that right now. They can also teach equity. Melissa, as you know, equality and equity are not the same thing. Equality refers to equality of opportunity, regardless of race, gender, or any other immutable characteristics. Equality is the good thing. Equality is the thing that we want taught. Sadly, right now in New Hampshire schools, because you guys destroyed the anti-CRT bill, the only thing that they are really teaching is equity, which refers to equality of outcomes. It is what Ibram X. Kendi is teaching in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Anytime you see equity show up in New Hampshire schools, and really, all you need to do to find equity is to go on any district website in New Hampshire and search for the term equity, and you can see they all have equity offices. They all use that sweet COVID money to create equity offices. So they're teaching that because you left that statement out of the bill that I told you that you needed to add in. In societies built on equity, no one can ever achieve greatness because greatness is not allowed for. If you want to learn more about what a society on equity looks like, you want to check out the short story rather, Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. That's a really good illustration of what a society built on equity would be. You can see here, these are a couple reenactments of the book that have been done in various films and videos and things like that, where ballerinas, in order to make sure that they can't jump too high because that would make them exceptional, they have to wear weights. So they can't jump any higher than anyone else. And for the people that are really smart, they have to wear headbands on their heads that create buzzing noises so it dulls their aptitude. And so it dumbs down their intelligence as a result. That's what a society built on equity looks like. And that is being taught in New Hampshire schools today because the GOP screwed up the bill. We also see racism being taught as power and privilege in New Hampshire schools today. This is specifically, by the way, being taught in the Exeter Region Cooperative School District, a school district that I have personally investigated, personally exposed for teaching critical race theory, an actual violation of the state's anti-CRT law, which John Formello's Human Rights Commission refuses to investigate. I have now talked to multiple parents in that school district, none of whom have been able to get the state to investigate the school district, even though they are openly violating state law. So we've got some problems. We've got some problems. And even so, even stuff like this, Melissa. Now, this is used by the Arizona Department of Education. This is a graph talking about when children start to become racist. You might say, but Carlin, if you were here, if you took the time out to have a conversation about this, Melissa, if you were here, you might say, well, Carlin, the bill says that you can't teach that white people are inherently racist. I just don't know what the problem is. The bill says that you can't teach that. The problem, Melissa, is that this graph doesn't teach that white people are inherently racist. This graph teaches that white people start to become racist at 3 years old. So because this graph doesn't teach that white people are inherently racist, and instead they just develop their racism over time, stuff like this is still being taught in New Hampshire schools today because you guys took out the provision in the bill that prevents the teaching of most of this garbage. Are you following along, Melissa? Is all this clear? Can anyone hear Melissa? I can hear the banging on my roof, but can anyone hear Melissa ask any questions about how this happened and how this bill has failed to protect New Hampshire's children? I guess I'm being just really thorough about what you guys need to do to fix this problem. But I want to get specific about this. Because anytime, Melissa, that I've tried to explain to the New Hampshire GOP about how critical race theory is taught in schools, I am ignored, I am shushed, I am waved away. I have people like you, Melissa, who come at me on Twitter and you say things like, Carlin, I just don't think you're serious about getting critical race theory out of schools. And I say, wait, what? Like, what? Because I've been telling you guys for a year and a half that you didn't ban how critical race theory is actually taught in schools. And I have proof of that. And I'm happy to show it to you at any time. And for some reason, Melissa, you guys just never listen and you guys just never take me up on the offer. So I thought that today would be just a great day to watch an actual class. Now, this is a class. This is a recording of a class that has been on my YouTube channel since I got it a long time ago. But this is a recording of a class that Cider, shout out Cider, a supporter on my channel sent me of his actual class. This is a real live 8th grade class that we're going to watch, Melissa. And in this real live 8th grade class, they are going to teach critical race theory right in front of us. So I just want to take it's a little bit of a longer video, but just to be really thorough here so that Melissa, you can walk away from this conversation with a really good and in-depth understanding of how critical race theory is taught in the classroom. I thought we would just watch about 15 minutes of a video that literally shows the teaching of critical race theory in an 8th grade classroom. Let's just do that. Let me get it up here. All right. Let's watch this here video. And guys, the blur that you're seeing, that's just covering up student names. I'm not hiding anything. That was just covering up student names because this is a real class. There's going to be a sound in a second. It's quiet right now. The teacher hasn't started speaking yet. Let me see if I can fast forward a little bit. There it is. There's the teacher.
Yes, the end of the Pledge of Allegiance. That's one of the places we hear that word and those words, and justice for all. Everyone should be equal. No one deserves less than someone else. Okay. Just going to read a few of these. Equality for everyone. Hear those words when we say the pledge. Equality and justice for everyone. Okay, so it looks like everyone has the same ideas. And so everyone can connect and has heard of the Pledge of Allegiance and those words, and justice for all. So justice is defined as behaving in a way that is fair, equal, inclusive, and balanced for everyone. All right. In this slide, I'd like for you to, it says, what does injustice look like? Draw a picture or write, excuse me, write a short poem that represents injustice. So you have a choice. Draw a picture, or you can write a short
The Pledge of Allegiance
that represents injustice. Give me 1 second. Okay, let me change the slide for you. Hold on 1 second.
And again, guys, the part is blacked out because those are student names in a student chat. You're not missing anything there.
Oops, sorry. Didn't want to play that. Give me 1 second to...
And the only reason we have this video is because of the pandemic.
Give me 1 second. Let me see something. Drawing. That was all right. I apologize. Okay, so you can, if you have a piece of paper, just draw on your own paper, and maybe you can share that in just a few minutes. Okay, you can draw on your own paper or write on your own paper. Let's try that today. On your own paper, draw what injustice looks like, or you can write your poem on your own paper. Go ahead and do that, please. Or you may do that. So in this KWL, about justice or injustice, what do you know? What do you want to know? And then we'll talk about, we'll do what you've learned later. So just put 1 or 2 bullets in each space for what you know and what you want to know. Okay.
And by the way, the student writing this, he knew exactly what to say. He's just telling them he's just telling the teacher what she wants to hear. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's smarter than half the people on Twitter. He's 15 years old. This is all they're doing in social studies classes, by the way. If you think this is boring, imagine how boring the 13-year-olds in this class found it when they had to take it 2 years ago. No, it wasn't the teacher, it was the student. This is what education under the time of COVID looked like, just in case anyone hasn't seen one of those classes. It is extremely boring. Too bad people like Melissa supported Chris Sununu having excessive emergency powers.
Okay, so we're not putting in anything that we've learned because what you've learned is already what you know. You haven't learned anything new today, so we're not putting in anything that we learned today. Okay, just put in what you know. Okay, someone says that Black people are killed more than white people. Injustice is a violation of someone's rights, and that justice is a belief that people should get what they deserve. Justice for all line was added in the pledge. Wow. There are things happening that exclude justice. Yes, justice is equality and not discriminating. Okay, so you guys know the definition of justice. You guys have heard this before. Someone even mentioned there's white privilege. All right.
White privilege can still be taught in New Hampshire schools.
We're gonna move on to the next slide.
It is taught in New Hampshire schools today.
Justice. Think about following the following, then answer these questions. When you heard the word justice, what do you think of? What does justice mean to you? We already answered that, so you don't have to answer that again. Okay, we already answered that. What does it mean to be privileged? How does privilege relate to justice? Let's look at these pictures and have some discussion. What do you see here in this first image? Anybody want to share?
What does it mean to be privileged? How does privilege relate to justice?
Anybody want to share? What do you see in this first image? You can just share out. You don't have to type anything.
This is currently taught in New Hampshire schools. Everything we're seeing is currently taught in New Hampshire schools.
One with the baby with the Apple, with the MacBook. And then you have the child who's hungry. What does it mean to be privileged? How does privilege relate to justice? That's what we're having a discussion about. All right, and so in this lower one, the girl has lots of obstacles. Now she has the same distance to run or to make it to the finish line, but she has more obstacles than this person right here. Okay, and what about this one? We talk about equity and being equal. Let's just say you had two people who are hungry, right? If you have two people who are hungry and you possibly could give both persons, say you can give them a Big Mac. You can give each of them a Big Mac. Does that necessarily mean that that was equal because you gave two people a Big Mac, the same Big Mac? Does that make it equal because you gave two hungry people a Big Mac? Can somebody type in the chat? What do you think about that? give 2 hungry people 2 Big Macs. Is that equal? That is equality? Yes, you think so? Okay, so what if one person gets full off of the Big Mac and the other person doesn't get full? Is it still equality? You think that's still equal just because you gave 2 people the same thing? Okay, so look at this one right here with equality with the.
Now, I just want to do a quick pause here. And I'm going to do a whole walkthrough of what she did at the end, just in case anyone missed something, because I know it's boring. But Melissa, did you see how the teacher did not talk about white people being bad? She talked about white privilege. Did you see how she didn't say that white people are fundamentally oppressive? She talked about equality versus equity. And now, Melissa, when she's teaching equity, she's teaching that equality would be if we just gave everyone the same amount of cheeseburgers. But some students need more cheeseburgers to be full than other students. And so it's not really equal if we're only giving everyone the same amount of cheeseburger, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. In order to have equity, we need to give some people more cheeseburgers than other because they just need more cheeseburgers than others. That's how. Oh, I'm sorry, Phil, you're correct. Big Mac. I'm sorry. So that's how they're actually teaching this stuff. They're not, Melissa, teaching white people are bad and oppressive. That's not what they're teaching. They're teaching systemic racism. They're teaching white privilege. They're teaching equality versus equity. They're teaching the 1619 Project curriculum. They're teaching the BLM curriculum. That's what they're teaching. And even though the class that we're watching here is not in New Hampshire, all of this is being taught in New Hampshire schools right now because the bill that the New Hampshire GOP passed did not account for any of this, which is what I told you guys at the time, and you didn't listen. Let's continue with the class.
People on the boxes. So we gave each person here the same size box. Does that make it equal for everyone in the picture, in that one? No, just because you give people the same thing doesn't make it equal. You have to give them what they need to be equal. Okay, yes. Yes. This is equality, that you're giving them the same thing, but it's not equity. All right. So is it the first picture shows equality? Yes. Yes. But is that fair? Is it fair? Is that equality fair? Us giving the 2 people the Big Macs, is that fair? That's what this means. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for being observant and noticing. All right, let's go on to the next one. So your privilege is based on your education, income, your sex, your race, your age, your ability, your language. All of those things affect your privilege and whether you receive justice in the United States. All right, privilege, advantages, benefits, or degrees of prestige and respect. All right, let's watch this video.
And I think I edited out the videos because I didn't want to get dinged for like a copyright thing. But if you actually go to this,
Can you guys see this?
If you actually go to the link, this video on my channel, it has links to them in the description. So let me stop.
Hold on.
So I edited these out just because I didn't want to get dinged for them, but you can actually go to this video on my channel. It's called Watch an 8th Grade Class Be Indoctrinated to be Social Justice Warriors. And I have the videos there. So you can actually watch, they just watch YouTube videos. That was all it is. They watched YouTube videos. They watched cartoons about systemic racism. I'll show you a little bit more in a sec.
Let me change something.
Lead a simple, powerful exercise.
This is Jamal. Jamal, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
Studied in 7th grade history or 8th grade civics so far about injustices or the justice system? You guys haven't studied about this yet? Not really? Okay. So is this the first time you've heard about racism? No? Okay. All right. So for the rest of this unit, this unit was developed by Fairfax County Public Schools, and all of the English teachers in the county, all of the 8th grade English teachers in the county are all teaching reading and writing via this idea of justice or social injustice. So this is happening all across the county. It's part of our curriculum for English. All right, so we're gonna skip this. So social injustice, we'll look at this one. So let's go back one. All members of society should be treated equally and fairly. So some of you talked about the picture with the people with the boxes. So it showed one was equal and the other one was fair. So equal and equity, that's what we're looking at. So social injustice is discrimination based on religion, race, gender, all of these things. And it's lacking adequate access to healthcare, education, resources, and so forth. So we'll look at some other videos later. All right, right now we're going to watch the Brown versus Board of Education video. And once we watch that, then we'll go on to some other parts of our lesson that we were talking about, like with prepositions. So let's just give me 1 second. Let me change the
discriminatory voting restrictions. For more information on this and many other important court cases throughout history, be sure to check out the other videos in our
with me as I go through the slides today. I am toggling between the different links, so thank you for being patient. We've seen the Brown versus Board of Education video. On your own, you will go to Quizlet. I will post this in our Google Classroom to look at the vocabulary associated with Brown versus Board of Education. All right, we're going to look at the vocabulary. All right, so summarize what you've learned about justice and what you would like to learn about justice. So just to let you know, everything we do in class is helping you to prepare for something else. Our English class is cumulative, so what we've done since the beginning of the year is still applicable and affects the rest of your year. So we're still working on summarizing, which that's something that we've been practicing for the last couple of weeks, especially while you're working on your projects. You're supposed to be summarizing information that you gathered from the sources, but also this social justice unit is preparing you for the unit project, which will start the project will start 3rd quarter, and the project will be about you researching a person who has experienced some injustice and has overcome the obstacles. So that's going to be, it's called that project is called Overcoming Obstacles. So as we're preparing today and learning today, you are preparing yourself for that project. Okay. Thank you all who have responded to the summary about about justice. Thank you for responding. All right, if you need to take a stretch break, let's go ahead and do that for about 5 minutes. Take a stretch break.
And that's it. That is the class that you can see quite clearly how exactly they taught every element that is required. And that's not the only class that student has taken on this. That was just one 20-minute class in which they introduced every single core concept that is required to teach critical race theory. And Melissa, every single one of those elements are taught in New Hampshire classrooms today. Every single one of those things is taught in New Hampshire classrooms to kids today because the bill that you guys passed is completely ineffective at stopping any of it. Now, I want to just put a really fine tooth on this or a really fine point on it rather, because I know that was kind of boring. And I think if we think it's boring, then the 8th graders who had to sit through that probably really thought it was boring. But here is how they are teaching critical race theory in school. Number one, they're talking about fairness and justice because what they're doing is playing on the fundamental sense of fairness that most kids have. Kids want things to be fair. And so if a teacher, an authority figure, says to them, don't you want and justice for all? Of course, they take out the liberty part of the Pledge of Allegiance. The teacher didn't talk about liberty. She just said, don't you want justice for all? What does justice for all at the end of the Pledge of Allegiance mean for you? And then once she got the kids thinking about that, then she introduced the idea of social justice by contrasting justice and injustice. And from there, she introduced the idea of equity. And she said, in order for there to be justice, because we all believe that justice is the best idea, we all believe, Melissa, that justice is what we should be shooting for, right, children? Since we all believe in justice, then we must believe in equity. Because you want things to be fair, right? And so what the teachers are doing is they're trying to make a fundamental link between a fair and just society and an equitable society, because she's talking to 13-year-olds, and 13-year-olds do not have a fully functional logic function of their brain. They won't develop that for about another 10 years. And so they introduce this idea of equity, which, as we know, and I'm sorry if you guys can hear my dogs barking right now. I think a roofer just knocked on my door. As you know, equity is a fundamentally Marxist idea, and the teacher actually explained this. The teacher in the video we just saw said, well, what if we just give everyone a Big Mac? But not everyone is filled up by a Big Mac. Some people need 2 Big Macs to be filled. So is it fair that those people who might need more than 1 Big Mac, is it fair that they only get 1 Big Mac when they might want to get 2? That is how they're introducing the idea of equity in the vision of Marx. From each according to their ability to each according to their need. That is what they're introducing. But instead, they're doing it with cartoons that look like this. Because this is a little bit more approachable for kids, isn't it, Melissa? They're teaching the idea that equity is just about giving people what they need, giving them 2 cheeseburgers or 2 boxes to stand on when they need 2 boxes, or a box to stand on when they need 1. And if they don't need a box to stand on at all, then they don't get a box at all. And that's what fairness and justice is. Now, we skipped over this in the video of the class, but here are some of the things that the video said that we didn't watch. So after that, they're teaching about the idea of privilege, the idea that some people just inherently have some more things than other people have. So once they get the kids to say, yes, we want the world to be a fair and just and equitable place, equity sounds pretty good to us because it means we all get 2 cheeseburgers. Then they introduce the idea that some people just have more privilege than others, and they do this in the form of a cartoon. Then once they do that, they introduce the idea of systemic racism, which would be prevented had the bill that the New Hampshire GOP passed actually contain the provision that I told you to put into it, which is that you can't teach that America is a fundamentally racist place. Because what they teach the kids once they've gotten them to agree to the idea that everything should be fair and just is the idea that the country is not fair and just because the country has systemic racism, and they do this using cartoons. And then once they've got them there, they teach them that if they want to be good people, that they will support social justice because it's good people that support social justice. It's the bad people who don't want fairness and don't want justice that don't support social justice. So, is all that clear, Melissa? Was any of this confusing? I just want to do a quick pause because I know we've gone through a lot of information today. It's information that I've been giving you guys for the last year and a half, but I just want to make sure that you're clear on the problem. Because you claim that I'm not the one that's serious about this. But every single time that I tell you guys the same thing for the last year and a half, it just really seems to fall on deaf ears, Melissa. So now that we have this time together, now that you have shown just how seriously you take the issue of critical race theory being taught in New Hampshire schools, I just want to make sure that everything that I've laid out is really, really clear. And then we're going to talk about solutions because it's actually really simple what you guys need to do if you care about fixing the problem that you created when you screwed up the anti-CRT bill in the first place. So are we good, Melissa? Do you have any questions? Ah, I thought not. Well, let's wrap this up, shall we? So, what must the New Hampshire GOP do if they want to fix this problem? It's actually really simple. First, we have to stop sticking our head in the sand. Because, again, I've had this conversation with multiple state reps at this point. I have documented this publicly. I have written about it publicly. Oh, do you have a question? Your rambling inarticulately has me smirking from ear to ear. You most definitely have not made yourself clear. What question do you have, random troll? Is this Melissa? Is this Melissa come in to troll my chat? Melissa, do you have any questions in the chat? I'll take your questions in the chat, Melissa, if you don't want to speak up. Melissa, you just think this is empty gibberish? Is that right? Is that right? No, you don't think it's empty gibberish? Do you have any questions? No, didn't think so. Didn't think so. So, what needs to be done to fix this problem? Number one, the GOP needs to stop sticking its head in the sand. The New Hampshire GOP needs to stop pretending that they banned critical race theory in the classroom because they most certainly did not ban critical race theory in the classroom. In fact, they eliminated the one part of the bill that would actually prevent this stuff from being taught in the classroom at all. So you need to stop pretending that you don't have anything to do because you do have some things to do. What the first thing that you need to do is reintroduce the legislation. And by the way, this legislation tried to be reintroduced this year and that failed too. You need to reintroduce the legislation to prohibit that teaching that America is a fundamentally racist country. You need to get that signed into law. You need to get that added to the law. If New Hampshire teachers are allowed to teach that America is a fundamentally racist country and that New Hampshire is a fundamentally racist state for that matter, then they will be teaching critical race theory because of all the reasons that I have already laid out. So that is number one thing that needs to happen. And that should be pretty easy, if I'm honest. Why does the New Hampshire GOP support the teaching that America is a fundamentally racist country? Because really, if the New Hampshire GOP that controls the House of Representatives, the state Senate, and the governor's mansion, if you guys control every branch of power in the New Hampshire state government and you still cannot pass a bill saying that teachers are not allowed to teach that America is a fundamentally racist country, then the only conclusion that we can draw, Melissa, is that you actually support the teaching that America is a fundamentally racist country. Melissa, do you support teaching that America is a fundamentally racist country? Maybe a really clear answer for us. Yes or no, Melissa? Do you support the teaching that America is a fundamentally racist country in New Hampshire public schools? Does the New Hampshire GOP support the teaching that New Hampshire or America is fundamentally racist in public schools? Is this the type of leadership that we can expect from the New Hampshire GOP? Melissa, my dogs are saying more than you right now. My dogs are literally having a greater part in this conversation than you are right now. I think this is a really easy question to answer. Do you want New Hampshire's kids learning that they live in a racist country, or don't you? Because I think that sounds like a really bad idea myself. I think that if this is a way to introduce Marx into the classroom, I think it might be better if we all just acknowledged that it might be a good idea to get off our asses and actually fix the problems. That's number one that needs to happen. However, there is something else that needs to happen too, because right now, the divisive concept bill that was passed is being enforced by the Human Rights Commission in New Hampshire. The Human Rights Commission reports to the Attorney General, John Famella, who watered down the bill in the first place. So the agency in charge of enforcing the bill is run by the person who destroyed the bill in the first place. Melissa, do you think this sounds like a good idea? I don't think this sounds like a good idea. Now, when I expose that the Exeter Region Cooperative School District is an open and blatant violation of the New Hampshire Educator Code of Conduct and in violation of this bill, and it says so on their website, the New Hampshire Department of Education told me that they would not be enforcing it because the Human Rights Commission is responsible for enforcing it. And then I went to the Human Rights Commission, and the Human Rights Commission said they wouldn't be enforcing it either. So, the state agency currently in charge of enforcing this bill is refusing to do so blatantly, flat out. They refuse to do it to me. They refuse multiple parents who have gone to them with violations of this bill. And so I think it would be a good idea to formally charge Frank Edelbutt and the Department of Education with enforcing open violations of the Educator Code of Conduct, which is exactly what happens when a teacher teaches things they should not be teaching. It is a formal violation of the Educator Code of Conduct. They're not allowed to do it. Sadly, if it's not being enforced by the New Hampshire GOP and the state of New Hampshire, then educators don't really care. So, in a reworking of the bill, I would not only add in the provision that they cannot teach that America is a fundamentally racist country, but that the Department of Education needs to be in charge of enforcing this bill. Not the Human Rights Commission, not anything related to the Attorney General at all, because he's not fucking doing his job, and he wouldn't anyway, and Chris Sununu's not going to force him to, because Chris Sununu is pandering to the teachers' unions and didn't want to enforce the bill in the first place. So this is what needs to happen. The GOP needs to take responsibility for doing its job. They need to prohibit the teaching that America is a fundamentally racist country, and they need to change the enforcement of the bill to the State Department of Education. Melissa, is all this clear? Is all this clear? Do you have any questions that I need to answer? Is the New Hampshire GOP going to do anything about this should you get reelected again? Because I know you're up for an election in about a week. will you be speaking to the concerns of New Hampshire's parents at all, based on the fact that all of this nonsense is still being taught in public schools? And Melissa, we haven't even talked today about how social emotional learning is mandated in every school in New Hampshire. It's on the Department of Education website. If you refuse to do something about critical race theory, Melissa, will you at least do something about the fact that social emotional learning is mandated in every school in New Hampshire? Are you guys willing to step up to the plate on that one with your little backroom deals? Ah, I thought not. I thought not. Well, Melissa, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to have a serious discussion on what you guys need to do to fix this problem. I now am abdicating my responsibility for this because I've been screaming about this for a year and a half. You guys haven't listened. I've written publicly about it on multiple occasions. I have had multiple conversations with multiple state reps. Melissa, you alone, I have reached out to no less than a dozen times in the last couple of weeks, privately. I offered to have your little backroom conversations, didn't I, Melissa? And you refused to answer. If you're so big on private conversations, Melissa, I guess I'm just curious about why you didn't answer the dozen times that I've reached out to you privately over the last couple of weeks. If you were so serious about fixing this problem, serious indeed. Serious indeed. So I have now done my due diligence. I have informed you all of what the problem is. I have been crystal clear about it on several occasions. I created a slide deck for you. I gave you evidence of what's happening. If you would like more evidence, Melissa, you are welcome to watch my happy hour streams on Friday. You're welcome to watch my school investigation videos. You're even welcome to actually answer the goddamn text that I've sent you and have the conversation that way. But let's not pretend, Melissa, that you don't know there's a problem. And let's not pretend that you guys have done anything to fix this problem in the last year and a half, because you have not. And there is no doubt in my mind that the New Hampshire GOP, and you specifically, Melissa, will continue to do nothing to fix this problem because the New Hampshire GOP doesn't actually care about solving the problem. If you did, you already would have done it. It's really not that hard. You guys control every level of government, and yet you allow Chris Sununu to dictate to you what bills you will and will not pass. And all the while, it's the kids in school that are suffering for it. It's the kids in school that are being taught Marxism. It's the parents that don't know what's going on, that are looking for people like you to protect them because you lie to them when you're campaigning for office, saying that you will, and then you get into office and you do absolutely nothing. Do you have anything to say for yourself at all, Melissa? Anything at all? I thought not. I thought not. Well, you have your information. I've clearly laid it out. I am happy to share this video with anyone in New Hampshire who wants to help to solve this problem, but I am now retired. If the New Hampshire GOP doesn't want to take this seriously and fix this problem, and the parents and the communities in New Hampshire won't hold your feet to the fire and make you take this seriously, there is nothing more I can do. There's nothing more I can do. I don't have kids in school, so my kids aren't getting indoctrinated by this bullshit. If you guys don't want to take this seriously and do something about it, then you get what you get. But don't say you weren't told, and don't say you didn't have chances, and don't say, Carlin, you don't really know how this stuff is fixed because it only takes place in private backroom conversations where the public can't see us. and you're not really serious about fixing this problem. Melissa, I don't think you're serious about fixing this problem. I think you just want to use it to campaign so you can get elected, so you can have the only position of power that you will ever have in your life, and then you will do absolutely nothing to solve the real problems that are actually taking place in the real world. So I'm going to go do my thing and continue to work directly with families. And you guys can do whatever you want to do. But I don't trust for one iota of a second that the New Hampshire GOP is going to take any responsibility for fixing this problem at all, which is why I'm going to teach families how to fix this problem. And then maybe, just maybe, if I get enough of them, say about 10,000, maybe then we can start to change culture so that they stop electing feckless cowards like you. I guess that's all we have, guys. Thank you, Melissa, for your time. I appreciate you not showing up today. Maybe we'll talk again soon. Somehow I doubt it. All right, guys, that is all I have for the stream today, but fear not. Fear not. This is but the first stream I'm doing today. It is not the last stream that I'm doing today. And later tonight at 9:30 to be exact, we will be having Nothing Remotely Controversial. If you have never seen Nothing Remotely Controversial, it's super fun. Joshua is a professional psychic, and he uses his psychic powers to help us peer beneath the surface and find out what's really going on. And Joshua sent me a special promo. Joshua is more excited about hammers than I have ever seen him excited about anything. And Joshua is very much looking forward to, psychicking what was going on with that guy with the hammer in Paul Pelosi's house. What was really happening? So we're going to be talking about that and much, much more tonight on Nothing Remotely Controversial. Take care, guys. We'll see you soon.